The artificial sun above Nexus Point's central promenade shifted from pale morning gold to a sharper midday white, adjusting to a schedule calculated by an orbital algorithm that claimed to understand productivity better than any living manager. Nathan Pierce did not believe in orbital algorithms. He believed in coffee. Unfortunately, the Interstellar Logistics Bureau's internal brewer had just displayed a polite but devastating message: maintenance required. Estimated repair time, 6 to 8 business days. 6 to 8 business days might as well have been 6 to 8 geological eras. So Nathan found himself drifting through the station's arterial corridor, carried along by a tide of traders, diplomats, cargo pilots, and one hovering crate that kept apologizing in 3 languages for blocking traffic. Nexus Point was less a station and more a small metal continent suspended in vacuum. Through the panoramic viewport, freighters glided in slow arcs, their hulls reflecting starlight like patient leviathans. Shuttles darted between docking spines. Far below, the curve of the hub world shimmered blue and silver. Normally, Nathan admired the view. Today, he admired only the glowing sign ahead that read, "Central Cafeteria. Hot meals, hotter gossip." Inside, the air hummed with layered conversations. Steam rose from protein vats. A trio of engineers argued about warp coil calibration. 2 insectoid merchants clicked their mandibles over a trade dispute. A sanitation drone zigzagged between tables, muttering about crumbs in a tone that suggested deep personal betrayal. Nathan collected a tray, accepted something labeled roasted synth fowl, and scanned the room for an empty seat. The cafeteria was unusually crowded, perhaps because a military delegation had docked that morning. Uniforms in dark tones dotted the tables. He had no interest in uniforms. He had spreadsheets waiting for him. 37 of them, each containing minor discrepancies that would absolutely, definitely end civilization, if not corrected by 1700 hours. He spotted a single vacant chair at a small metallic table near the viewport. The other seat was occupied by a woman seated with impeccable posture, her gaze directed toward the drifting ships outside. From behind, she appeared unremarkable, dark hair falling neatly along her shoulders, uniform tailored to precision. No visible insignia from Nathan's angle. No bodyguards looming nearby. Most importantly, no one else seemed to be claiming the chair. He slid into the seat with the quiet relief of a man who had narrowly avoided standing awkwardly with a tray. "Excuse me," he said automatically, adjusting his napkin. "I promise I won't steal anything from your plate, unless it's better than mine." The woman turned her head toward him. Her face was striking in its symmetry, calm yet sharpened by something disciplined. She looked human in nearly every respect. Clear skin, steady eyes, controlled expression. And then Nathan noticed the ears. They were long, elegant, tapering subtly beyond the line of her hair, unmistakably not human. He blinked once, processing. "Well," he continued with the same cheerful momentum he used when confronted by malfunctioning spreadsheets, "that explains why the line moved so efficiently. I always suspected humans were the bottleneck." For a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowed as if assessing threat vectors. Then something shifted, an almost imperceptible relaxation. "I have never been accused of improving cafeteria traffic flow," she replied, her voice low and precise. "First time for everything," Nathan said, carving into his synth fowl. "I'm Nathan, clerk, professional reconciler of other people's chaos." She studied him as though trying to determine whether he was sincere or catastrophically unaware. "You do not recognize me," she observed. Nathan paused mid-bite. "Should I? Did we file something together? If this is about Docking Bay 12's inventory audit, I can explain." A silence settled over their table. It felt different from the general cafeteria noise, as if a pocket of air had been carefully evacuated. Nathan became faintly aware that the conversations at nearby tables had lowered in volume. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere to his left and then stopped. The woman's gaze flickered briefly around the room and returned to him. "No," she said. "We have not filed anything together." "Good," Nathan exhaled. "I'm already behind." He took a sip of his coffee and immediately regretted it. "By the way, this beverage is either experimental fuel or a subtle act of revenge by the culinary staff." The corner of her mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Not yet. I find it acceptable, she said. That's concerning, Nathan replied. What do you consider unacceptable? Defeat, she answered calmly. Nathan nodded as if this were a normal cafeteria response. Understandable. I personally consider unbalanced spreadsheets unacceptable. We all fight our wars. Her eyes lingered on him, curiosity now layered over scrutiny. Outside the viewport, a massive cruiser eased into docking position, its hull scarred from previous engagements. The station lights reflected along its surface like distant lightning. You speak of war lightly, she said. I speak of everything lightly, Nathan corrected. It's a survival mechanism. If I take things too seriously, I start alphabetizing my cereal. A faint sound escaped her. Soft, brief. It took Nathan a heartbeat to recognize it as a suppressed laugh. Around them, tension thickened. Nathan finally noticed the glances. Several patrons were pretending to be fascinated by their meals while unmistakably watching their table. A pair of uniformed officers at the far end exchanged looks heavy with meaning. Nathan leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Are we accidentally sitting in someone's reserved seat? Because I will absolutely surrender it. I'm very flexible about furniture." The woman's expression shifted again, something almost vulnerable passing through her eyes before discipline reclaimed it. "No," she said quietly. "This seat was not reserved." "Excellent," Nathan replied. "I'd hate to be responsible for an interstellar incident over cafeteria etiquette." He gestured toward the viewport. "That cruiser just came in, didn't it? Looks impressive. I assume someone important is aboard." Her gaze followed his hand to the ship. "Yes," she said. "Must be exhausting," Nathan continued, oblivious to the weight of his proximity. "Being important, I can barely handle being moderately necessary." For the first time, her posture softened, by a degree so slight only someone watching closely would have seen it. The rigid line of her shoulders eased. The fingers resting beside her tray relaxed. "You are not concerned," she observed. "About?" Nathan asked. "About sitting here." Nathan glanced around again, more carefully this time. He noticed how space subtly widened around their table, how even the sanitation drone adjusted its path to avoid passing too close. A ripple of recognition moved through him, slow and unsettling. He looked back at her, truly seeing the uniform now, the insignia at her collar, the subtle markings denoting rank and fleet command. Stories he had overheard in corridors surfaced in his mind, a name whispered with equal parts admiration and fear. His fork lowered gradually. "Ah," he said faintly. Understanding dawned fully, and with it came the sudden electric awareness of exactly whose table he had chosen. He set his utensils down with deliberate care, offering a polite, slightly strained smile. "Well, this has been enlightening. I have just remembered a very urgent appointment with a spreadsheet that fears me far less than I fear it." He began to rise. Her hand closed around his forearm, not violently, not even firmly, just enough to stop him. The contact sent a current of stillness through the air between them. Conversations in the cafeteria seemed to freeze entirely now, as if the station itself were holding its breath. "Please," she said. The word was quiet, not a command, a request. Nathan looked down at her hand, then back into her eyes. Whatever legend surrounded her did not align with the expression he saw there. It was not hunger for dominance or calculation of strategy. It was something far more disarming. "Stay," she said softly. The word lingered between them longer than it should have. Stay. Nathan Pierce had heard that tone before, in entirely different circumstances. A supervisor once used it when a decimal point had migrated 3 columns to the left and caused mild economic panic in 3 sectors. But this was not the voice of a supervisor correcting clerical error. This was quieter, almost fragile. Around them, the cafeteria resumed movement in cautious increments. Someone cleared their throat. A chair scraped. The sanitation drone resumed its zigzagging patrol, though it now kept a respectful orbit of at least 3 meters from their table, as if fearing disciplinary action from the laws of physics themselves. Nathan remained half-standing, frozen in a position that was neither dignified nor comfortable. "Stay," she repeated, her hand still resting around his forearm. Not tight, not trapping. Simply there. He lowered himself back into the chair slowly, like a man attempting to defuse an explosive device labeled emotional consequences. Okay, he said carefully. I can stay. I have nowhere urgent to be, except the Bureau, and they have survived worse. Her fingers released him immediately, retreating as though she feared she had overstepped. Thank you, she said. Nathan adjusted his sleeve, trying to reassemble his composure. His mind raced through half-remembered stories whispered in corridors. Commander Sable, fleet tactician, suppressor of uprisings. The name carried weight. Entire star systems adjusted their behavior at its mention. He looked at her again. Really looked. Up close, her features were precise, almost sculpted by restraint. Her long ears curved elegantly, twitching ever so slightly as if attuned to frequencies he could not hear. There were faint scars along her knuckles. Not decorative, not accidental. He cleared his throat. So, hypothetically speaking, if someone accidentally sat next to the most strategically terrifying individual in 3 sectors, what is the appropriate cafeteria etiquette? She regarded him steadily. You have decided not to flee. I am still considering it, he admitted, but I find fleeing often complicates digestion. A flicker of amusement surfaced in her eyes. You are aware of who I am. Yes, he said. It arrived late, like a delayed transmission. Very dramatic. And yet you remain. Nathan gestured weakly toward his tray. My synth fowl would feel abandoned. For a moment, silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, less brittle, less volatile. You were speaking of spreadsheets, she said. I was, Nathan confirmed. They are merciless. One misaligned cargo entry, and suddenly 3 freighters are delivering plasma conduits to a botanical garden. She tilted her head slightly. You correct these errors. I try, he said modestly. The galaxy would collapse without proper labeling. That is unlikely. You say that, Nathan replied, but have you ever tried to conquer a system with incorrect supply chain documentation? Chaos. Her lips parted in what might have been the beginning of laughter, though she suppressed it quickly. Old habits. Across the cafeteria, 2 junior officers stood abruptly, as if debating whether to intervene. One of them whispered something into a wristcom. Nathan pretended not to notice. He was now acutely aware that he might be the subject of a very official misunderstanding. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Just to clarify, am I in danger? She held his gaze without flinching. No. Personal danger? Political danger? Mild social embarrassment? No, she repeated more firmly. Nathan exhaled. Excellent, because I left my dramatic final speech in my other jacket. Something shifted in her expression at that. Something like relief, as if his continued presence, his absurd commentary, was stabilizing a variable she had not expected. They avoid me, she said quietly, almost to herself. Nathan followed her glance around the room. It was subtle but undeniable. The space surrounding their table had expanded. Conversations curved away from them. Even the insectoid merchants had relocated 2 tables farther than necessary. Well, Nathan said thoughtfully, you do have an aura. Aura, she repeated flatly. Yes, very decisive. That is an unusual adjective. I am a clerk. Our vocabulary is limited, but creative. She studied him again, more intently now. When you first sat down, you did not hesitate. I was hungry, he said. Hunger overrides common sense. It is a biological feature. You did not recognize the insignia. I did not, he admitted. To be fair, I usually avoid reading insignias. They rarely indicate who has the best dessert. Her eyes softened almost imperceptibly. For 5 minutes, she said slowly, you spoke to me as if I were ordinary. Nathan blinked. You are ordinary. The words left his mouth before he could filter them. He froze. I mean, not ordinary in the catastrophic sense. You are clearly exceptional. Just also a person. Her long ears shifted slightly backward, then forward again, betraying a micro-expression he did not understand, but instinctively felt was significant. I am not perceived that way, she said. I've noticed, Nathan replied. The sanitation drone is actively avoiding eye contact. As if on cue, the drone emitted a nervous chime and rerouted around a distant table. For the first time, she laughed openly. It was not loud, but it was unrestrained. The sound cut cleanly through the cafeteria noise, bright and startling. Several heads snapped in their direction, stunned. Nathan smiled, relieved. See? Not terrifying. Mildly intimidating at worst. You are either very brave, she said, or profoundly foolish. I have been described as both, he said, sometimes in the same performance review. Outside the viewport, a patrol frigate glided past, its weapon arrays dormant but unmistakable. Nathan followed its trajectory, then glanced back at her. You command ships like that, he said carefully. Yes. And you've done what they say. I have. He swallowed, the weight of that acknowledgement settling briefly over them. But right now, he continued, forcing lightness back into the air, you are evaluating cafeteria beverages and tolerating my commentary on supply chain disasters. That is accurate. Then perhaps, he said gently, the galaxy can survive 15 more minutes. She looked at him then, not as an officer assessing a civilian, not as a legend-gauging reaction, but as a woman measuring sincerity. You may leave, she said after a moment. I will not prevent you. The offer was genuine, the choice placed squarely before him. Nathan considered the exits, considered the watching eyes, considered the stories. Then he picked up his fork again. I never finish a meal halfway, he said. It would set a dangerous precedent. A pause. And, he added quietly, you asked me to stay. Something in her posture eased again, tension draining from muscles long accustomed to vigilance. Yes, she said, I did. And for the first time in what might have been decades, Commander Sable did not sit alone. Nathan discovered that once you consciously decide not to flee from a legendary fleet commander, the body reacts in curious ways. His pulse stabilized, his breathing slowed. Either he had achieved enlightenment or shock had settled in comfortably. Commander Sable sat across from him with the composed stillness of someone accustomed to commanding starships through hostile nebulae. Yet now she was holding a cup of cafeteria coffee and studying its surface as though it were a strategic anomaly. You truly did not know who I was, she said after a while. I suspected you might be in upper management, Nathan replied. You have that posture, very decisive spine. She gave him a look that could have silenced artillery. I mean that respectfully, he added quickly. Her long ears shifted slightly, catching the hum of distant engines reverberating through the station's structure. Nexus Point never truly slept. Even now he could feel the faint vibration of docking clamps, engaging and disengaging somewhere beyond the walls. Most beings recognize me immediately, she said. I'm not very observant, Nathan admitted. Last week I spent 10 minutes talking to a coat rack before realizing it was not responding. That is not reassuring. It was a very convincing coat rack. A faint smile returned to her expression, subtle but unmistakable. It transformed her features, softening angles that had likely intimidated admirals. Why do they fear you? Nathan asked, then immediately winced. Sorry, that sounds accusatory. I mean, strategically fear, respectfully fear. She considered him for a moment before answering. Because I am efficient, she said. When conflict arises, I resolve it without hesitation. That sounds like a positive trait, Nathan said. In clerical work, hesitation is how you end up shipping reactor cores to a bakery. In warfare, she replied, hesitation ends lives. The words settled between them with gravity. Outside the viewport, a transport vessel drifted past, its hull scorched along one side. Nathan followed its slow rotation. You've seen a great deal, he said quietly. Yes. And done a great deal. Yes? He tapped his fork lightly against his tray. Does efficiency make good company? Her gaze sharpened slightly. No. There it was, the admission beneath the legend. Around them, the cafeteria had resumed something close to normal activity, though the orbit of empty space around their table remained intact. A holographic display near the ceiling flickered with shipping updates. Arrival, Orion Trade Collective. Departure, Sector Patrol Fleet. Delays and coordinates scrolled in blue light. You command the Sector Patrol Fleet currently docked, Nathan said, piecing together the insignia and the cruiser he had seen earlier. I do. And you're here because diplomatic consultations, she answered. That sounds ominous. It is often tedious. He brightened. Ah, a fellow sufferer of paperwork. She blinked. Paperwork? Metaphorical paperwork, he clarified. Strategic alignments, resource allocations, posturing, subtle threats delivered in polite language. You describe diplomacy accurately. I binge-read meeting transcripts for entertainment, Nathan said gravely. She studied him. You are attempting to normalize my presence. Yes, he admitted. Is it working? A pause. Partially, he grinned. Progress. She shifted slightly in her seat, her posture relaxing by degrees so small they might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. The hand that had once halted his escape now rested loosely near her cup. When I enter a room, she said, conversations end. Nathan glanced around theatrically. They did. It was dramatic, very cinematic. You do not seem concerned. I am concerned, he said honestly. I just prefer to handle concern with commentary. She tilted her head. Why? Because if I let silence take over, I start imagining worst-case scenarios, and my imagination is overqualified. A sanitation drone hovered closer than before, its sensors blinking uncertainly. It projected a soft chime. Spill risk probability reduced, it announced to no one in particular, as if reassured by their lack of violence. Nathan gestured toward it. See? Even the station infrastructure is adjusting to your mood. Sable watched the drone retreat. It is programmed to respond to tension spikes, which means, Nathan said, leaning forward slightly, you've been radiating tension. Her eyes met his. I have. He hesitated before asking, because of me? A flicker of vulnerability passed across her face, gone almost instantly. No, she said, because of habit. He nodded slowly. Habit can be persistent. I still stand up when someone says, audit. She seemed to consider this as a serious confession. On my homeworld, she said after a moment, physical proximity signals trust. Nathan froze mid-bite. We are in close proximity. Yes. And you did not reposition. No. He swallowed. Should I reposition? If you wish. He glanced at the empty seats around them, the careful perimeter maintained by everyone else. No, he said. I think this one is fine. Her long ears angled slightly toward him, attentive. You are aware, she continued, that my reputation is not exaggerated. I gathered that. You remain. I do, he said, though my survival instincts are currently filing complaints. That earned another brief laugh from her, softer this time but genuine. For decades, she said quietly, no one has remained once they understood. Nathan studied her more closely now. Beneath the uniform, beneath the composure, there was exhaustion. Not physical, something deeper. Maybe, he said carefully, they were responding to the story of you, not you. She did not answer immediately. Outside, the cruiser that had docked earlier released a shimmer of energy as its reactors cycled down. The station lights reflected off its hull in sharp lines. And what story do you see? She asked at last. Nathan considered. I see someone who can silence a room, he said. Someone who can probably dismantle a pirate armada before lunch. Someone who drinks terrible coffee without complaint. Her eyes narrowed slightly in mock offense. It is acceptable. And, he continued gently, someone who asked a stranger to stay. Silence settled again, but it no longer felt oppressive. It felt deliberate. You interpret that as weakness, she said. I interpret it as bravery, Nathan replied. She held his gaze steadily, searching for mockery, for insincerity. Finding none. Bravery, she repeated. It's easier to command fleets than to ask for company, he said. At least I imagine it is. Her fingers tightened faintly around her cup, then loosened. You imagine correctly. Nathan leaned back slightly, giving her space without retreating. Well, he said lightly, for the record, I charge very reasonable rates for company, usually payable in tolerable coffee. She looked at him for a long moment. You are unusual, Clerk Nathan Pierce. I've been told that as well. typically in footnotes. A faint warmth touched her expression again. You may continue to sit. He lifted his cup in a small salute. An honor. Across the cafeteria, the junior officers who had been watching finally seemed to accept that no interstellar incident would erupt. Conversations resumed at full volume. The invisible perimeter around their table shrank by a few cautious inches. Nathan glanced toward the viewport once more. You know, he said, from this angle, the cruiser looks less intimidating. Almost peaceful. It is not peaceful, she said automatically. No, he agreed, but right now it's docked, resting. Even warships need to recharge. Her gaze followed his to the vessel outside. Yes, she said quietly. They do. And for the first time since she had entered the cafeteria, Commander Sable did not look like a weapon waiting to be deployed. She looked like someone who had finally allowed herself to sit still. Nathan discovered that prolonged exposure to a feared fleet commander did not, in fact, result in spontaneous vaporization. It did, however, produce a strange awareness of posture. He found himself sitting straighter, as if poor spinal alignment might be interpreted as diplomatic insult. Commander Sable rested her forearms lightly on the table now, no longer poised, as if anticipating attack vectors. The insignia at her collar caught the cafeteria's artificial sunlight, reflecting faint metallic blue. You monitor the station traffic frequently? She asked. Only obsessively, Nathan replied. Cargo flow is like a living organism. If one shipment sneezes, 3 systems catch a cold. Her long ears angled slightly toward him, attentive. Your role appears critical. That is the kindest description anyone has ever given clerical logistics, he said solemnly. We are the invisible skeleton of civilization. You are not invisible, she said. He blinked. That is debatable. I once waved at my supervisor for 6 minutes. I mean, she clarified, you do not behave as if you are. Nathan considered that. Around them, the cafeteria had grown bolder. The empty perimeter around their table had narrowed. A pair of traitors had taken seats only 2 tables away, though they were very carefully pretending to debate spice tariffs. I behave, he said, as if invisibility is optional. It confuses people. It does, she agreed quietly. A holographic news panel flickered near the ceiling, projecting rotating headlines. Border skirmish averted. Diplomatic summit continues. A faint ripple of recognition passed across Sable's face at the mention of the summit. You are here for the summit, Nathan said. Yes. And it involves the border skirmish. It does. He stabbed another piece of synth-foul thoughtfully. That headline says averted. That implies you did something. She did not answer immediately. Instead, her gaze shifted to the viewport where the cruiser rested, docked like a slumbering beast. There was potential for escalation, she said at last. We ensured there was not. That sounds heroic, Nathan said. It was procedural. Heroism is often procedural, he replied. Filling out the correct forms at the right time. She gave him a long look. You reduce everything to paperwork. I reduce everything to scale, he corrected gently. If I imagine you as an unstoppable tactical force, I might panic. If I imagine you as someone attending meetings and signing documents, I can function? You are not panicking. I am managing it, he said honestly. A faint current of humor shimmered through her expression again. Your management is unconventional. It is cost-effective. The sanitation drone returned, hovering closer than before. It extended a small manipulator arm and delicately removed an empty cup from their table. Thank you, Nathan told it. Gratitude acknowledged, the drone chimed, then hesitated, its sensors lingering briefly on Sable before retreating. They adapt quickly, she observed. Machines? Nathan asked. Yes. They follow patterns, he said. And right now the pattern is, Commander Sable is not disintegrating the cafeteria. A subtle exhale escaped her. I have never disintegrated a cafeteria. Good to know, he said, making a mental note. Silence settled between them again, but it felt companionable now rather than charged. Beyond the glass, a small shuttle detached from the cruiser, thrusters glowing softly as it drifted toward a diplomatic docking ring. On my homeworld, Sable said after a while, proximity is not merely physical. Nathan looked at her. Meaning? It signifies intention, alignment. That sounds serious, he said. It is. He shifted slightly in his seat. And what does this proximity signify? Her gaze did not waver. Curiosity. He raised his brows. About me? Yes. That is alarming, he muttered. Her lips curved faintly. You speak without calculation. That is because calculation is exhausting, he said. I leave that to professionals. You assume I am calculating now, aren't you? He asked gently. A pause. I am attempting not to. The honesty of that admission caught him off guard. Is that difficult? He asked. Yes. He nodded slowly. Habit again. Yes. Around them, the ambient hum of the station deepened as another large vessel engaged docking clamps. The floor vibrated faintly beneath their feet, a reminder that Nexus Point was never entirely still. Does your crew fear you? Nathan asked, then winced again. I ask questions impulsively. It is a condition. They respect me, she said. That was not my question. Her long ears angled slightly backward before returning to neutral. A tell, he realized. Some fear me, she admitted. And does that bother you? It ensures efficiency. That was not my question either. She studied him carefully, perhaps weighing how much to reveal. Yes, she said finally. It does. He leaned back, absorbing that. You win battles. You prevent wars. You silence rooms. And yet the silence is the part you dislike. Yes. Nathan glanced around the cafeteria again. Conversations had resumed fully now, though occasional glances still flicked toward them. The orbit of isolation had shrunk to something almost normal. You know, he said lightly, when I walk into a room, no one falls silent. Sometimes I consider hiring a dramatic soundtrack. Her eyes narrowed in faint amusement. You desire intimidation? Not really, it sounds inconvenient. I would prefer mild admiration and access to better desserts. She shook her head slightly, a gesture that felt surprisingly human. Your humor, she said, diffuses tension. That is the goal, he replied. Tension is exhausting. For you, for everyone, he corrected gently. She was quiet for a long moment, watching him with an intensity that was no longer tactical but observational. Studying his expressions, the way he gestured when he spoke, the small hesitations before his more serious remarks. You are not afraid now, she said. I am, he answered honestly. Just not of you. Her brow furrowed slightly. Then of what? Of saying something careless and ruining the moment, he said. A stillness followed that confession. You believe this moment can be ruined? She asked. Yes. By you. Historically, I have a strong record of self-sabotage. The faintest smile returned. I do not consider you destructive. That is reassuring. She looked toward the viewport again, at the cruiser resting beyond. For decades, every interaction has been strategic, measured, weighted. And this one? He asked. She turned back to him. This one is unmeasured. Nathan felt something shift in his chest at that. Well, he said softly, we can measure it later, after dessert. Her laughter came again, brighter this time, drawing only curious glances instead of alarmed ones. You are persistent, she said. I work in logistics, he replied. Persistence is our only weapon. Outside, the shuttle reached the diplomatic ring and locked into place. A subtle change in the station's lighting signaled a scheduled shift in the artificial day cycle. Nathan realized how much time had passed. I should eventually return to my bureau, he said reluctantly. Spreadsheets await judgment. She nodded, though something in her posture suggested reluctance as well. You may go, she said. The words were steadier this time, not defensive, not resigned. He remained seated for another heartbeat. And if I choose to come back tomorrow? He asked. Her long ears tilted slightly forward. Then I will be here, she said. Nathan stood slowly, gathering his tray. He hesitated, then offered a small, informal nod. For the record, he said, you are less terrifying than advertised. Her gaze held his. For the record, she replied, you are more courageous than you believe. He almost laughed that off, but something in her tone stopped him. See you tomorrow, he said. And as he walked away through the humming, luminous corridors of Nexus Point, He felt the subtle, undeniable sense that something vast had shifted, quietly, without fanfare, between a clerk and a commander. The following cycle, Nexus Point's artificial dawn shimmered across the inner curve of the station with calculated optimism. Nathan Pierce stared at the Interstellar Logistics Bureau's wall display while pretending to review shipment discrepancies. In reality, he was timing his lunch break with the precision of a smuggler plotting a narrow hyperspace corridor. He had told himself he would not overthink it. He had absolutely overthought it. At precisely 12:07 station time, he stood, smoothed his uniform, and announced to no one in particular, "I am conducting field research." No one looked up. He made his way through the corridor arteries again, past cargo lifters gliding on anti-grav rails, and a cluster of diplomats arguing in carefully moderated tones. The news panel still cycled updates about the summit. Border stability talks continue. Fleet presence maintained. He felt the fleet presence long before he reached the cafeteria. Sector patrol officers were posted along the promenade now, not aggressive, but unmistakably alert. Their armor reflected the corridor lights in muted tones. Nathan slowed slightly. One of the officers recognized him. The look was unmistakable, not hostile, curious. "You," the officer said. "Me," Nathan confirmed, because clarity was important. "You were seated with the commander yesterday." "I was seated near her," Nathan corrected gently. "Technically." The officer studied him as if expecting scorch marks. "You appear intact." "I moisturize," Nathan replied. The officer blinked once, clearly uncertain how to categorize him, then stepped aside. Nathan continued toward the cafeteria, resisting the urge to check whether he had accidentally become an interstellar headline. Inside, the cafeteria atmosphere had shifted. It was not tense exactly, but aware. Conversations dipped briefly when he entered, then resumed. She was already there. Commander Sable sat at the same table near the viewport. Posture composed, uniform immaculate. The cruiser still rested beyond the glass like a watchful sentinel. Nathan's steps slowed for a heartbeat. Then he walked directly to the table and sat down. "Good afternoon," he said, placing his tray down. "I survived the Bureau." Her long ears angled toward him immediately. "You returned," she said. "I said I would," he replied. "Clerks are bound by their word. It's in the manual." "There is a manual?" "No," he admitted, "but there should be." A faint warmth touched her expression, subtle but present. "You are aware," she said, "that my officers observed you this morning." "Yes, I passed the intact inspection." She studied him carefully. "You do not seem disturbed." "Should I be?" "Associating with me carries perception." Nathan considered that while unwrapping a nutrient bar that tasted faintly of regret. "Perception is overrated," he said. "Last month, someone thought I was an undercover auditor. I spent 3 days being offered free snacks." Her eyes flickered with amusement. "You risk misunderstanding," she said. "I work in logistics," he replied. "Misunderstanding is my primary fuel source." The cafeteria noise settled into a steady rhythm. The empty orbit around their table was smaller now. Not gone, but smaller. "You were discussed," she said. He nearly dropped his nutrient bar. "By whom?" "My officers." "That sounds ominous." "They are evaluating whether you are reckless or strategic." Nathan stared at her. "Those are the only two options?" "They are the most probable. I would like to nominate hungry as an alternative." Her lips curved faintly. "They believe you may be attempting influence." He choked slightly. "Influence? I influence printer settings." "You remain seated beside a fleet commander despite knowledge of my record." "Yes," he said carefully. "Why?" The question was direct, not accusatory. He met her gaze. "Because you asked me to stay." Silence rippled outward from their table, though this time it felt less sharp. Her long ears shifted slightly, reacting to subtle tonal shifts in the room that he could not detect. "That is insufficient justification," she said quietly. "It was sufficient for me." She watched him, measuring. "You are not seeking advantage," she said. "I am seeking tolerable coffee and conversation," he replied. "Conversation with me carries consequence." "Everything carries consequence," he said lightly. "Yesterday I misfiled a docking permit and accidentally rerouted a florist." Her brow lifted slightly. A florist. Yes, it was dramatic. Many apologies were exchanged. A faint laugh escaped her again, and this time it did not startle the room. A few heads turned, but without alarm. Outside the viewport, a pair of patrol ships undocked in synchronized motion, engines flaring briefly before fading into distant points of light. "My officers fear for you," she said after a moment. "That is unnecessary," Nathan replied. "I am excellent at self-preservation." "You remained seated yesterday." "Yes." "You returned today." "Yes." "That contradicts your statement." He leaned forward slightly. "Commander," he said softly, "there is a difference between fear and threat." Her eyes sharpened. "I do not threaten you," she said. "I know. Others perceive me as threat. They perceive the story," he corrected gently. "And you do not?" "I perceive someone who drinks terrible coffee and listens very carefully." Her gaze lingered on him. "You are simplifying." "I am human," he said. "It's what we do." She was quiet for a long moment. "When I enter negotiations," she said slowly, "every word is weighed, every expression analyzed. Silence is weaponized." "And here?" he asked. "Here," she said, "you discuss florists." He smiled. "Florists are underappreciated." A junior officer approached their table cautiously, stopping at a respectful distance. "Commander," the officer said, eyes flicking briefly toward Nathan, "Diplomatic Channel 3 requests confirmation of your attendance at the afternoon session." "I will attend," she said without breaking eye contact with Nathan. The officer hesitated, then added, "Is there anything else required?" Nathan raised his hand slightly. "Better coffee." The officer stared at him as if unsure whether humor constituted a hostile act. "Dismissed," Sable said calmly. The officer retreated. Nathan exhaled slowly. "I may have disrupted military protocol." "You did," she confirmed. "Apologies." "It was informative." "In what way?" "My officers are unaccustomed to unpredictability that is not strategic." "I specialize in non-strategic unpredictability," he said proudly. Her long ears angled forward again, attentive. "You do not treat me as superior," she said. "I treat you as present," he replied. Another silence. Not heavy, not sharp, something steadier. Across the cafeteria, more seats filled near them. The invisible perimeter continued shrinking. The sanitation drone passed within a meter of their table without hesitation. "You are altering perception," she said quietly. "Me?" Nathan blinked. "By remaining." He glanced around. The glances directed toward them were different now. Less fear, more curiosity. "I'm just eating lunch," he said. "You are normalizing proximity." That sounds like something a sociologist would say. "It is an observation." He leaned back slightly. "Well," he said, "if normalizing proximity requires enduring this coffee, I am clearly heroic." Her laughter came again, brighter, freer. And as it did, something subtle shifted in the room. Conversations did not falter. No one froze. The sound of a fleet commander laughing became simply another note in the cafeteria's hum. Nathan noticed. "So," he said lightly, "what is on today's diplomatic agenda?" "Border stability," she replied. "That sounds less fun than florists." "It is." "Will you win?" She looked at him carefully. "This is not about winning." He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Winning all the time sounds exhausting." Her gaze softened again. "Yes," she said quietly. "It is." And for the first time, as officers and traders and clerks moved around them without flinching, Commander Sable did not look like an anomaly in the room. She looked like someone who had chosen to sit. By the fourth shared lunch cycle, Nexus Point had adjusted its internal narrative. The first day had been shock, the second suspicion, the third analysis. By the fourth, it was simply an anomaly the station's collective consciousness had decided not to panic about. Nathan Pierce entered the cafeteria carrying a tray and the fragile confidence of a man who had accidentally disrupted galactic sociology. Two officers near the entrance nodded at him. Nodded. He nearly tripped. "Good afternoon," one of them said cautiously, as though addressing a civilian explosive device. "Good afternoon," Nathan replied. "I promise I am unarmed, emotionally unpredictable, but unarmed." The officer did not respond, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Progress, Nathan thought. Commander Sable was already seated at their usual table. The cruiser beyond the viewport had powered down most external lights, its silhouette resting in quiet authority against the stars. Smaller vessels moved around it like cautious fish around a patient predator. Nathan slid into his chair. "I have achieved nod status," he announced. "I am aware," Sable said. "You are monitoring me?" "My officers are," she corrected. "That sounds worse. They report no threat indicators. I am delighted to pass." Her long ears angled slightly toward him, catching the subtle tonal variations of the cafeteria. The ambient noise was fuller now, less brittle. Even a group of engineering cadets had chosen a table nearby without visible hesitation. "You are influencing morale," she said. Nathan blinked. "I file cargo manifests." "You remain," she replied. "That seems to be my primary achievement." She studied him carefully. "You do not withdraw despite scrutiny." "Withdrawal implies retreat," he said. "I prefer persistence." "Persistence can be misinterpreted." "I am aware." He unwrapped a sandwich that appeared to contain something legally classified as vegetable. "You had your diplomatic session," he said. "Yes." "And?" She leaned back slightly, gaze drifting to the viewport. "The border dispute is stabilizing." "That sounds good." "It is fragile." "Most things are," Nathan replied. "Even this sandwich." Her attention returned to him. "You trivialize instability." "I contextualize it," he corrected gently. A sanitation drone hovered by their table, this time without hesitation, collecting discarded utensils from nearby patrons. It paused beside Sable for half a second, then continued its route. Nathan gestured toward it. "You are officially integrated into cafeteria operations." "It appears so." "You no longer cause robotics anxiety." "That is not a metric I have previously considered." "You should," he said seriously. "Robotics anxiety is an important indicator." She almost smiled. Across the room, a holoscreen flickered with live star maps, displaying shifting patrol routes. Sector patrol insignias glowed along the border region. "You are redeploying ships," Nathan observed. "Yes." "Preventative positioning?" "Correct." "That sounds like very calm warfare." "It is not warfare." "Strategic calmness, then." She regarded him steadily. "You speak as if these maneuvers are routine." "Are they not?" "They are calculated deterrence." "Which sounds like routine for you." A pause. "Yes." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Does routine feel different now?" Her gaze sharpened. "Explain." "You used to enter rooms and silence them," he said. "Now you enter the cafeteria and order coffee." "That is not equivalent." "It is to me." A group of cadets at the nearby table glanced over, whispering. One of them, emboldened by something, curiosity perhaps, stood and approached cautiously. "Commander," the cadet said, voice steady but respectful. Sable's posture shifted subtly, authority settling over her like a second uniform. "Yes." "Request permission to speak." "Granted." The cadet glanced at Nathan briefly, then back at her. "We wanted to express appreciation for your handling of the border incident." "It was procedural," she replied. The cadet hesitated. "Still, thank you." A quiet moment passed. Nathan watched closely. "You are dismissed," Sable said. The cadet returned to the table, relief visible in the set of their shoulders. Nathan waited until the conversation hum resumed before speaking. "You see," he said softly. She looked at him. "That was not fear," he continued. "That was respect." Her long ears tilted slightly backward, then forward again, processing. "Respect can coexist with fear," she said. "Yes," he agreed, "but it doesn't have to." Silence stretched between them, not tense but thoughtful. "You believe my presence here alters that balance," she said. "I believe you laughing alters that balance," he replied. She gave him a long look. "I do not laugh often." "I've noticed. On my homeworld, laughter is rarely public." "On mine, it's survival," he said. She watched him carefully as if attempting to understand the mechanics of something unfamiliar. "You treat this as simple," she said. "It is not simple," he answered. "It is small." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Small does not mean insignificant," he added. "Small means manageable." Outside the viewport, a patrol ship executed a precise rotational maneuver, engines flaring briefly before dimming. The stars beyond shimmered against the curved glass. "You are not intimidated by proximity to power," she observed. "I am intimidated by malfunctioning printers," he replied. "That is illogical. Printers are unpredictable." A faint, unmistakable laugh escaped her again. The cadets nearby visibly relaxed at the sound. "You see?" Nathan murmured. She followed his gaze. "They respond to you differently," she said. "They respond to you differently," he corrected. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup thoughtfully. "For decades," she said quietly, "my presence signaled escalation." "And now?" he asked. She looked around the cafeteria, at the cadets, the traders, the sanitation drone gliding confidently past. "Now it signals something else." "Lunch," Nathan suggested. A softer expression settled across her features. "Yes," she said. Another officer approached, older, expression measured. "Commander," he said, "the fleet is ready for redeployment orders." "I will issue them shortly," she replied. The officer glanced at Nathan, not with suspicion this time, but with assessment. "You are the clerk," he said. "I am," Nathan confirmed. "You have caused significant discussion." "I try not to," Nathan replied. The officer studied him for a moment longer, then inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement. When he departed, Nathan exhaled. "I believe I have been categorized," he said. "As what?" Sable asked. "Unusual but non-hostile." "That is accurate." She looked at him again, more directly. "You remain, despite increasing visibility." "Yes. You understand that association with me will continue to attract attention." "Yes. And you accept that." Nathan considered the vastness outside the viewport, the cruiser, the patrol ships, the shifting borderlines. "I accept that proximity does not equal danger," he said quietly, her long ears angled forward, attentive. "And," she prompted. "And," he continued, meeting her gaze, "I accept that someone should sit with you without calculating advantage." Silence enveloped them, but it was no longer isolating. It felt anchored. "You are altering more than morale," she said softly. "I am eating lunch," he insisted. She did not argue. Outside, the cruiser's engines pulsed faintly as preparations for departure began. "You will redeploy soon," Nathan said. "Yes. And the cafeteria will return to normal." "It will." He nodded slowly. "Then we should maximize the abnormal." Her eyes held his. "You approach change without fear," she said. "I approach it with commentary," he corrected. Another quiet laugh escaped her, easy and unguarded, and this time no one in the cafeteria paused. The day the cruiser prepared to depart, Nexus Point felt different, not quieter. The station was never quiet. Cargo haulers still groaned against docking clamps. Diplomats still debated in layered tones, and sanitation drones still issued passive-aggressive reminders about tray placement. But beneath the mechanical rhythm, there was anticipation, a subtle current moving through corridors and across holoscreens. Nathan Pierce stood in the Bureau's observation alcove, staring at the massive hull of the sector patrol cruiser beyond the viewport. Its engines pulsed in slow, luminous waves as pre-departure diagnostics ran along its spine. Patrol ships drifted into formation around it like disciplined satellites. His terminal chimed behind him. He ignored it. "Clerk Pierce." He turned. The senior logistics supervisor stood in the doorway, arms folded. "Yes? You've been visible this week. That sounds concerning." "It has been noted," the supervisor continued, stepping closer to the viewport. "Fleet officers have requested updates directly from you." Nathan blinked. "About cargo?" "Yes. That is technically my job." The supervisor studied him. "You've conducted yourself professionally?" "I always do." "Despite unusual circumstances?" Nathan followed her gaze to the cruiser. "Yes," he said quietly. She hesitated. "You understand that your association with Commander Sable has altered perception." Nathan thought of nodding officers, of cadets offering gratitude, of a sanitation drone no longer rerouting in anxiety. "I understand," he said. "Good," she replied. "Continue." That was it. No reprimand, no warning, just acknowledgement. When she left, Nathan returned his attention to the cruiser. The cafeteria was fuller than usual at midday. Not crowded, attentive. Word had spread that the fleet would depart within the hour. Sable was already seated at their table. She did not wear ceremonial armor or an augmented command mantle. Only her standard uniform, immaculate but unembellished. The long curve of her ears caught the light as she turned toward him. "You are late," she said. "I was being professionally visible," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "Your visibility has increased." "I've noticed." Outside the viewport, docking clamps disengaged with deliberate precision. "You depart soon," he said. "Yes." He nodded, letting the weight of that settle without dramatics. The cafeteria noise hummed around them. No one pretended not to watch anymore. They watched openly now, but not with fear. "My officers requested to meet you," she said. Nathan nearly dropped his cup. "Why?" "They wish to understand you." "That sounds invasive." "It was curiosity." He exhaled slowly. "And they have concluded you are not strategic." "That feels insulting." "It was not." He raised an eyebrow. "They concluded you are consistent," she clarified, "and uncalculated." "That sounds slightly better." "It is." He smiled faintly. A group of cadets approached again, more confident this time. "Commander," one said, voice steady, "safe travels." "Thank you," she replied. The cadet nodded at Nathan. "Clerk." Nathan nodded back gravely. "Cadet." They retreated without tension. "You see?" Nathan murmured. "Yes," she said. Outside, the cruiser's main engines flared brighter. "You altered the room," she said quietly. "You altered it," he corrected. "I would not have remained here without you." He considered that carefully. "Maybe," and he said, "you would have, eventually." Her gaze held his. "Not like this." Silence, but not heavy. "When you first sat," she continued, "you did not calculate consequence. I calculated seating availability. And when you understood who I was, you remained." "Yes." "Why?" He leaned back slightly, searching for a version of the truth that was simple enough to say aloud. "Because leaving would have confirmed the story," he said, "and I prefer evidence." Her long ears angled forward, attentive. "You chose evidence," she repeated. "I chose to see if the person matched the legend. And," he met her gaze directly, "you exceeded it." A faint warmth touched her expression. "You speak boldly," she said. "I have learned that silence can be misinterpreted," he replied. The cruiser's engines intensified, the glow reflecting across the cafeteria's curved glass. "You have changed," she said. He blinked. "Have I?" "You sit differently," she observed. "You do not scan exits as frequently." "I scan less," he admitted. "You speak with more certainty." "That might be a side effect of surviving association." A quiet laugh escaped her. "For decades," she said softly, "I was defined by efficiency." "You are still efficient." "Yes," she agreed, "but not only." He watched the engines flare brighter. "You will return to Border Patrol," he said. "Yes." "And the summit?" "Stabilized." "No immediate war?" "No." He nodded, relief subtle but real. "Good," he said. "I prefer florists undisturbed." Her eyes softened again. "You reduced tension," she said, "in negotiations." "I did nothing." "You normalized my presence," she corrected. "Reports indicate a shift in tone." Nathan stared at her. "You are telling me cafeteria lunches affected diplomatic posture?" "Yes." He sat back slowly. "That seems disproportionate." "It is human," she said. The cruiser's docking clamps released fully. The massive vessel drifted outward, slow and deliberate. "You asked me to stay," he said quietly. "Yes." "I did." "You did." A moment passed, suspended like the cruiser beyond the glass. "You will return to your bureau," she said. "Yes." "You will file cargo manifests." "Yes." "You will remain visible." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." She stood. The movement drew subtle attention throughout the cafeteria, but no one froze. Nathan rose as well. "This is the part where you say something dramatic," he said lightly. She stepped closer, not touching him this time. "Clerk Nathan Pierce," she said, voice steady, "you reminded me that proximity does not equal threat." He swallowed. And you, he replied, reminded me that reputation is not identity. A faint hum vibrated through the station as the cruiser engaged forward thrust. You will not be alone, he said, her long ears angled slightly. No, she agreed. I will not. For the first time, she extended her hand, not to stop him, but openly. He took it. The handshake was firm, deliberate, unguarded. Try better coffee on your next deployment, he said. I will consider it. And avoid unnecessary wars. I will prioritize Flores. He smiled. She released his hand. Without ceremony, she turned and walked toward the exit, officers falling into step beside her, not as a barrier, but as accompaniment. The cruiser outside accelerated, engines flaring into brilliant white before fading into distant light. The cafeteria resumed its full rhythm. Nathan remained standing for a moment longer, watching until the ship was no longer visible. Then he sat. The sanitation drone hovered near. Spill risk probability nominal, it chimed. Good, Nathan replied softly. He picked up his cup, now empty, and glanced around the room. Conversations flowed freely. Cadets laughed. Traders argued amicably. No one scanned the door in anticipation. He realized, not with pride, but with clarity, that he no longer felt the need to shrink within the room. He stood differently, walked differently. When he returned to the bureau, officers nodded without hesitation. His supervisor glanced at him once, approving. He sat at his terminal and opened a shipment manifest. Outside, Nexus Point continued its endless orbit. Inside, clerk Nathan Pierce adjusted a cargo discrepancy with calm precision. He no longer saw himself as invisible. And somewhere beyond the border, aboard a cruiser cutting through the stars, Commander Sable entered a negotiation chamber, not as a legend of violence, but as a presence that no longer required silence to command respect. Neither of them would admit it aloud, but both carried something small and steady forward into the vastness. They had remained, and that had been enough.